everyone, welcome back to another video. I figured I should finally sit down and talk about my diagnosis and the results of my holter monitor very quickly. If you're wondering why I keep looking down here, I have my laptop just so I can, make sure I say the correct information and make sure I get everything right. So on the 19th of April, I had my appointment with the specialist. So how that one went is, before I saw the specialist, I first saw the nurse, and she just, went through all the background and the history of my health and a lot of information, pretty much. There was a lot of questions, just like have been coping with the symptoms, etc., that I've been having, and she was the one to give me the diagnosis, and of course it was confirmed with the specialist. So the main thing we talked about was the POTS, the postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which I was sort of diagnosed with before that appointment. It was like a 85% sure that I had POTS, but it was definitely confirmed during that appointment, and I got mine from COVID. Fun times. But yeah, I got COVID twice last year. The first time was in June, and then the second time was in December. And of course, I was that very lucky person to get COVID on Christmas. Was the day I tested positive, was Christmas Day. Anyways, and so after the first lot of COVID I had, I didn't necessarily have any symptoms. Like, I was having some funky heart arrhythmias, but that was it, pretty much. It wasn't until I got my second lot of COVID where I started feeling all of, the dizziness, lightheadedness, feeling faint, and really struggling. So I think they also figured out that I had long COVID as well, which is fun, which is essentially just the COVID stays in your system for a long time, so you're not necessarily infectious. You're not going to give it to other people, but your body's still trying to recuperate. It just takes a while. So the POTS, what I'm going to quickly do is just read it from the screen so that I don't mess it up. So it is a disorder that can make someone feel faint or dizzy. It happens when the autonomic nervous system doesn't work as it should. The autonomic nervous system is the body's autopilot system, controlling things like heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing. Also, it does pretty much control literally every function of your body. The actual causes of POTS is sort of unknown. I mean, they're doing a lot of research about it, obviously, but the main things that they've found, again, I'll look to my computer, the main things they've found, it often begins after pregnancy, major surgery, trauma, or a viral illness. So like I said, I got mine from COVID. The treatment for POTS is essentially fluid intake, salt increase, wearing compression stockings, exercises, and medications, which sounds like a lot, but you gotta do what you gotta do, pretty much. So with fluid intake, it's pretty much just staying hydrated. So a way that I do that is by having hydrolyte, which is very helpful. I never realized how helpful it was before I started having it. And what hydrolyte is good for, again, I'll read it from the laptop, is replacing fluids and minerals such as sodium and potassium, which is also lost from things like vomiting or diarrhea. But as well, if you're just feeling dehydrated, it can help bring everything back up again, and it definitely helps POTS symptoms. The other thing as well is the salt intake. So I have to have an extra 2 teaspoons of salt a day, which doesn't seem like a lot. It's just trying to remember to add salt to things or keep my salt increase up can be a bit difficult. So what I do sometimes do is just add salt to my hydrolyte, which it tastes really gross, but I sort of just chug it down, because if I think it's helping my body, I'll just get it over and done quickly with. So the other thing as well is the compression stocks, which is what I'm wearing, and that just keeps like the blood vessels and everything tight, so they can keep on flowing pretty much. and medication. So I have my medications, well, the ones I take at least, with me. So the first thing is Florinef. That is out of focus, but Florinef or fludrocortisone, which is a medication that can cause fluid retention, which can lead to high blood pressure and changes in the heart function. So I struggle a lot with the low blood pressure, so this just keeps it at a good level and keeps it stable. I also take ivabradine. I think that's how you say it. I'm not too sure. But this one reduces my heart rate, because with my arrhythmias, which I'll get into a bit later, if they're too fast, then it can start causing issues. So if my heart rate's having the arrhythmias but still slow, it feels funky, but it's okay. So yeah, so the ivabradine, I think that's how you say it, keeps my heart rate slow. It also as well can help with the POTS, is when I am standing up, my heart rate can stay at a low level, because with my heart rate as well, it can go from like 65 beats to minutes and like shoot up to like 130 just by standing. So yes, the ivabradine keeps it from going really fast. The other medicine that I take is Vasodrine, and I only have the strip because this is what I was given, because at the time there is a shortage of Vasodrine pretty much in every single chemist. So yeah, so they just gave me the strip so I could at least start it. And thankfully I've phoned around and I've found a pharmacy that has them in stock, but it's very difficult to get. But Vasodrine, or the drug in it, is Midodrine. Don't know how to pronounce these things, but it helps keeping my blood pressure low. But it's sort of a confusing thing because obviously I'm taking medication to keep my blood pressure high, then this lowers it. So it's sort of like a meet in the middle sort of thing. But this is good because it obviously keeps my blood pressure from going too low, and it helps me just, be able to do things and what I say is function as a human being. Because obviously if you have a low blood pressure, you just feel ill and exhausted. So yeah, so that sort of keeps everything balanced. I do find it a bit funny that I am taking these two medications and they sort of do the opposite things, but it's helping. The other thing we spoke about was Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic condition that mainly affects the joints, skin and walls of the blood vessels. So if you know me, you know that I've had pretty much every single joint injury under the sun. Thankfully I haven't dislocated anything yet, but I was always having, sprains. My joints would like rolled ankles and all of that. I was that person at school that was just always injured. The criteria for diagnosing Ehlers-Danlos is a bit strange, and I think they're looking at changing it. But because I didn't tick all of the boxes, they couldn't diagnose me with it. But say if my mum has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, then it's in the genes. So then I have Ehlers-Danlos. I don't know how it works, but that's what it is pretty much. So my mum is going to get some tests done to see if she's got it. But for now, what they are calling it is just hypermobility, which again affects the joints and the skin and the everything else. And what I found funny was when she was asking me the questions just about like injuries I've had and other body functional issues that I've been having, which I'll get into in a second. She just made my whole entire life make sense. So the main thing is, like I said, is all the injuries that I was having. I could easily roll an ankle or sprain a joint or just, pretty much every injury. Like I was saying, like in 2019, I had a shoulder surgery. It was an arthroscopy because I had bursitis, and no matter what treatment, the bursitis was just not going away. So they did an arthroscopy pretty much just to remove the bursitis, which is the bursa, which is like a sac of fluid in your joints to keep them, keep the bones pretty much from rubbing together. So they got rid of that, and they sort of shaved a few of my bones to make room. And as well, fun fact, my bicep muscle, the tendon, you know, obviously it attaches up there. Mine now attaches, can't really see it, but it attaches there. Sort of see the scar there. So they moved that just to help have room in my shoulder, and so when the new bursa grew back, it had optimal room there. And as well, what I didn't realize is hypermobility just affects a lot of things that the body does, whether it's the digestive system. I have a uterus, so menstrual cycles and whatnot. And yeah, the treatment for hypermobility is pretty much just exercising and physio exercises. So with the exercising is just pretty much keeping the muscles strong. So yeah, everything can be all tight and they can hold themselves together, pretty much. And as well the physio exercises, which is again just to keep the muscles and joints all strong so they're not too loose. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's pretty much the treatment. And of course, if I do have an injury, just resting and, well, RICE is what it is, so the rest, ice, compress and elevate, and just, yeah, making sure I take a bit of extra care of my body if I am injured. So finally, the results of my holter monitor. So before I had the monitoring done, they were thinking the arrhythmias that I was having could potentially be life-threatening or dangerous, but thankfully, like a big sigh of relief, they're not. My heart is, the way I describe it at least, is just a bit funky at times, but it's not necessarily causing any issues or any damage, which is great. So I just have these funky arrhythmias that just aren't really doing anything, which is always fun. Not actually fun, because I do feel a lot of the palpitations, and also I can get chest pain, but turns out chest pain is not because my heart's having the arrhythmias, it's because with my POTS and my hypermobility, essentially my body is in constant fight or flight mode. So when my heart's going all funky, it just sort of goes into fight mode and goes, oh, we need to take care of this, but really it's fine. So pretty much my body's freaking out for no reason, which is, you know, an interesting way of putting it, but it's essentially just what's happening is my heart has some funky times where, again, the way I describe it is I think it just gets bored and just goes, I'm gonna have this arrhythmia because why not? And they didn't particularly talk about the arrhythmias or what was causing it. I think that's what we're going to talk about at the next appointment. But for now, all I know is that it's not dangerous or life-threatening, which is, again, a big sigh of relief and sort of calms a lot of the worries that I've been having. So yeah, that is my diagnosis and the results of my holter monitor. I am still in like the, I guess, early stages of being diagnosed, so I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything and understand it all. But I figured I should, you know, sit down and finally do the video of what I got diagnosed with and all of that and sort of explain it more. So bear with me as I try to wrap my head around it, and again, hopefully the video makes sense. But yeah, that is that, and I will see you in another video.